Hey, this is Mr. Barr, and these are the notes that go with medians, altitudes, angle bisectors, and perpendicular bisectors. More than anything, we're just learning a whole bunch of vocabulary. If you look back at the last lesson, we talked about parallel lines and transversals. Before that, we talked about adjacent, congruent, complementary, supplementary, so just a bunch of vocabulary. Let's start with our name on this one and our big, crazy title. Medians, altitudes, angle bisectors, and perpendicular bisectors. Perpendicular bisectors. Perpen, it's an N. Medians, altitudes, angle bisectors, perpendicular bisectors. So let's start with medians, altitude, We have more vocabulary and identification today. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to look at a picture and determine what you are looking at using words like median, altitudes, angle bisectors, perpendicular bisectors. Okay, so a median. A median is a segment that extends from the vertex of a triangle to the midpoint of the opposite side. Yep. We're going to put that into our notes. So I have this wonderful triangle. A median. It goes from one vertex to the opposite side, and it cuts that opposite side in half. A median. A segment that extends from the vertex of a triangle to the midpoint of the opposite side. It extends from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. Now, I have it written, oh, you can't see what it is. Median, a segment that extends from the vertex of a triangle to the midpoint of the opposite side. And don't always think that they have to be oriented perfectly like that. Remember, that is still a median, and now it's still a median, and it's still a median. So I know I kind of draw them so that we orient them nicely, but they're just medians. Okay, that's a median. An altitude goes from a vertex and lands on the opposite side at a 90-degree angle. And we're going to draw two lines, or two examples of an altitude. Altitude. A segment that extends from a vertex and lands perpendicularly on the opposite side. perpendicularly on the opposite side. So let's draw a picture of that triangle, but I'm also going to do this one here. Ready? Okay. Perpendicular altitude. Ready? Comes straight down. Right triangle. That is an altitude. The thing is, this would also be considered an altitude. I would have to extend this side out. Well, I think you get the idea. That's also an altitude, even though it's not really hitting the side. You know, I'm going to pause the video. Let me go see if I can find a better definition for you somewhere online. So, in geometry, an altitude of a triangle is a line segment through a vertex and perpendicular to a line containing the base. So a segment that extends from a vertex and lands perpendicularly on the opposite side, it has to land perpendicularly on a line that contains the opposite side. So right here, see if that makes sense to you. This, first off, this triangle is just a mess, but so wow, man, I just messed up that, didn't I? Okay. So it comes down from the vertex, and lands perpendicularly on the line that contains the opposite side. There we go. So don't think that the altitude has to be on the interior of the triangle. The altitude can be on the exterior of the triangle also. Good enough. So we've done an altitude. Okay, an angle bisector cuts an angle in half. Angle bisector. It cuts an angle in half. So if I have an angle right here, and I cut this thing exactly in half, that's an angle bisector. So maybe this one right here, this guy is congruent to this guy. I could show it with some numbers also. Maybe this is 30 degrees, and this is 30 degrees. And this is an angle bisector. So an angle bisector cuts an angle into two congruent angles. It cuts it in half. Bisect means cuts it in half. And a perpendicular bisector cuts a segment in half. Let's, we're going to add two things. Let's add a segment bisector versus a perpendicular bisector. Okay. So segment bisector So a segment bisector cuts a segment in half. Segment bisector cuts a segment in half. So if I have this segment right here, boom, that's not a very good bisector, but so do you see the red line is cutting AB in half? A perpendicular bisector is going to do the same thing, except it's going to come in perpendicular to the segment. So a perpendicular bisector, a segment that is perpendicular to another segment and cuts it in half. So that's a perpendicular bisector. It cuts a segment in half and is perpendicular. I'll draw a picture of that. So I have this segment. I'll try to do a better job this time. So I have this segment. Make this one perfect. Okay, perpendicular bisector. So it's got to come in perpendicularly. That's a perpendicular bisector. So the segments that it created are identical, they're congruent, and it's coming in perpendicularly. It's coming in at a 90-degree angle. So notice that this is the perpendicular bisector. The brown one is, because it's coming perpendicularly to the green line and cutting it exactly in half. But green is not a perpendicular bisector to brown. Green is perpendicular to brown, but it doesn't bisect the brown. All right, let's do some example problems here. That's it for the notes. I know, that's 14 minutes of notes. And now we're going to do some practice. Now practice. Oh, right. So what are we doing? We're identifying stuff here, I think. Look at the diagram. What is IK? What is IK? IK is some kind of a bisector. It's a bisector. It's cutting that segment in half. It is, let me go back to my notes. It is a median, right? It's a median. Yep, right? Median. It's coming out of the vertex and splitting the opposite side. That's a median. Let's see what's going on here. What is GI? GI, it's cutting that angle in half, which means it is, ready? Boom, right there. It's an angle bisector. Let's see. PRS is a right angle. PRS is a right angle. So it's saying that this saying that's a right angle. Okay, so what is PR? What is this thing right here? Well, it's coming down and it's at a right angle. It is an altitude. What's going on with this one? Angle STV. STV is a right angle. Let's mark this thing up. And TU is congruent to ST. So I got this line coming down at a right angle and splitting that line in half. Coming down at a right angle and splitting it in half. That feels like a perpendicular bisector. YZ. No, XZ is, I don't even know, man. Look at the diagram. What is it? It's a nothing. It's not an angle bisector, and I don't know if it's perpendicular over here, so I don't know if it's an altitude. It's a nothing. What about this? What? WU. I don't know. It's not perpendicular. It's not a median because it's not cutting this guy in half. It's a nothing. So when you do the IXLs, remember there are some that are just nothings. All right, hey, thanks for watching. Have a good day.